Well, good afternoon, good evening, good morning, wherever you happen to be today for this live stream from hosting.com Agency Success. My name is Nathan Ingram. I am the agency trainer here, and today we are talking about a critical topic, especially as we're beginning the new year. I've been coaching micro agency owners for more than 10 years now, and in thousands of conversations over those years, this issue that we're talking about today might be the most important thing that you can get your hands around if you're going to be an agency owner or whatever you call yourself. If you're going to be doing web work with clients, this is a topic that I think you'll immediately identify with. And it's a challenge that, again, if you get your hands around it and create a plan, it can really change how your business flows. And I hope that for you in this calendar year. So in those thousands of conversations I've had over the last more than 10 years of coaching micro agency owners, I hear things like, I'm tired, I'm just worn out, it's hard work, it's a lot more hours than I'm expecting to work, I'm working 50 plus hours a week and I can barely keep up. I hear things like, there's just so much more that I want to do in my business, and I feel like everybody else, other agencies are offering more services than I do, but I just can't seem to find the time to work on my own business because I'm always doing things for my clients. Now, if that resonates with you, I have good news because that's exactly the core problem we're going to address in today's live stream. So it is today, January the 6th of 2026. So welcome to the new year. And I just want to ask you this question. What is your business going to be like at the end of this year? What is your business going to be like at the end of this year? Do you have a bunch of a list of ideas that you want to see happen in your business? What are those ideas? But more importantly, how many of them will you actually implement during this year? And why is it so hard for me to work on my own business when I have all this other client work that's hanging around out there? Why is it so hard for me to work on my business? Our challenge here is an age-old struggle of strategy versus execution. It's not just something that's in the web world. This is a topic that's talked about with business owners of all types. This strategy versus execution issue is a real challenge. Strategy is working on my business, making it better, learning new tools, building new processes and systems, investigating ideas that could, bear fruit in my business through efficiency or more profit or whatever it may be. All those strategic, big picture issues in our business. Whereas execution is working in my business. Strategy working on my business, execution working in my business. That's doing the work, doing the client work, answering the trouble tickets, dealing with the emails, building the sites and projects and those sorts of things. Now, what I've learned over the years is that for most of us doing the kind of work that we do, execution is natural. Like, we're good at doing what we do. We like to build websites. We like to, figure out the tech and help clients answer the questions that they have. Strategy, on the other hand, is hard. And it's especially hard if you started out in this business as a technician. And by that, I mean, you started out, building websites, you love the tech, you know the nuts and bolts of everything. You're a technician, and it sort of grew into you having a business, right? And so if that's you and you start as a technician, strategy is naturally hard. So if you find this issue a challenge, you're in good company because most of us who started as technicians really struggle with strategy, whereas we love the execution. So why is it so hard for those of us, especially that are technicians at heart? Why is it so hard for us to keep strategy as part of our focus? And I want to give you a word picture here that is the answer to that question. It is the whirlwind. Why is it so hard for us to keep strategy in focus in the middle of all the other work that we're doing? And the answer is this concept of the whirlwind. And if you're like me, you have a lot of great ideas that never seem to get implemented. And the reason for it is life gets in the way. Customer demands come up. Family issues need our attention. That's the whirlwind. It's all the things swirling around in our world that take our attention away from strategy and the things we need to do to grow our business. So I have all these great ideas that I want to do and things that I know I ought to do or need to do. And all of a sudden, it's 3 months later and I haven't done any of them. That's the issue that we deal with. And if you are relating to that description, you are, again, you're in good company because all of us, to some degree, I've come to believe, struggle with this issue. So here's where we're heading over the next hour or so in this conversation. And we're first going to understand this problem. I want to unpack the concept of the whirlwind. Then I want to help us think through a strategy to deal with this challenge of the whirlwind. And finally, I'm going to give you some suggestions for success, which are basically all the ways I've done this wrong in the 30 years I've been working for clients building websites. So that's where we're headed today, and hopefully this will be helpful to you. Now, if you're just joining us, I'm going to drop in again the links to download the slides there in the chat. If you are watching this on a replay, there'll be a QR code later on in the live stream where you can download the slide packet to have all these resources as well. So let's start out with understanding this problem, understanding the challenge that we're up against with the whirlwind. We need to know our enemy. So what is the whirlwind? Well, the whirlwind, I would say, is the energy and attention that it takes to run your business. Energy and attention it takes to run your business. The whirlwind is the 14 emails from clients that were waiting on you this morning, all with demands for things that had to be done by noon. The whirlwind is the customer call that comes in right as you were about to start working on your own website for a change, right? The whirlwind is that 1 hour meeting with a client that stretches into 3. And sometimes the whirlwind is the sick animal that you end up having to spend half a day at the vet with unexpectedly. And now there's a big challenge. A lot of things you're planning to do that now have to be done at a different time. A lot of times we come to our desk with the best of intentions. It's finally going to be a day where I get to work on my stuff, to work on my website, to build out this new page or this new service or explore this new product. And all of a sudden we hit our desk and it lasts about 10 minutes because there are all these things, all the client needs, all the things that we run into face first when we start our day. Now, I've spent hours and hours in seminars and live streams and reading books and articles and blog posts and all these things, all full of great information that I know would help my business. And then I never ended up implementing any of it at all. And it wasn't the author's fault or the presenter's fault. It was excellent information, but in the end, I didn't do any of it. And the reason was that when I got back to my desk, there were the emails and the phone calls and the demands and all the things that took my energy and attention in execution instead of strategy. Or maybe it was, and I'm sure this is only me, none of you would ever do this, but perhaps I got fascinated by a new piece of shiny technology, and I spent half a day tinkering with something that didn't really move the yardsticks for my business, instead of implementing an idea that I knew actually probably could move the yardsticks for my business. Sometimes it's my own fault. That's what I'm saying. Now, the challenge here, the problem with the whirlwind is that strategy is important, but the whirlwind is urgent. Now, dwell on that just for a minute. Strategy we know is important. We know that we ought to be doing things to grow our business, to make things better, to learn new tools, all these things, right? But the whirlwind is urgent. And Franklin Covey Company says, when urgency and importance clash, urgency wins every time. And isn't that true? Haven't you experienced that in your own world? Like there's a bunch of stuff we know we ought to be doing, but it's not the thing we actually end up doing, because when urgency and importance clash, urgency is going to win every time. We're going to do the thing that we perceive to be urgent instead of, and kind of push the other stuff down the road. As for the strategy and these great ideas and the goals, we'll get to those next week, right? Now, the problem with that view, though, is that delaying strategy doesn't work. When we say, oh, well, I'll get to it next week, I'll get to it next month, I'll do it in the summer, I'll do it, whenever, that doesn't work because the whirlwind never goes away. The lesson we never seem to learn is next week when I think that I'm going to be able to work on this or whatever, the whirlwind is still going to be there. And so just simply delaying strategy and thinking I'll get to it later, it's not a good solution to this problem. I've tried it many, many times and it doesn't work. It's like the definition of insanity, right? Like I'm trying to do the same thing every time and expecting different results when actually next week, even though I say I'm going to get to it next week, I forget the whirlwind is there too, because the whirlwind never goes away. Now, what we have to realize, though, is that the whirlwind isn't bad. It's your business. It's just a fact of life. The whirlwind isn't bad. It's your work. If there was no whirlwind, you'd be in trouble because there'd be no money coming in, right? So the whirlwind isn't bad. It just is what it is. It's a fact of life that we have to factor into whatever strategy we're going to create to deal with this issue. So we have to accept it and consider the whirlwind as part of what we think about wrapping a solution around. We can't just think, well, it's just going to go away because it won't. The whirlwind never goes away. So this is where we come to this point of saying, how do we deal with this? And it's a strategy that I've called taming the whirlwind. So now that we have gotten a better understanding of what it is we're up against, let's figure out a plan to deal with it. So what we need is some sort of plan that we can follow that's going to let us accomplish the goals that we have in the middle of the whirlwind. So if you're a business owner, you're a smart person, right? You have some level of discipline. Otherwise, you wouldn't be doing what you do. There are plenty of people who don't own their own business for lots of different reasons, but you do. And you are doing good work and you're keeping all the balls in the air and the plate spinning and all of this. You've got some level of discipline. So the challenge is not really accomplishing your goals. It's accomplishing your goals in the middle of the whirlwind. So this is why it's so important. This plan needs to take that into account because again, without a plan, the whirlwind always wins. And why is that? Because when urgency and importance clash, urgency wins every time. So we have to have a plan. And you've seen this happen in your own world, right? If I go into my week without a plan, the whirlwind always takes over. So here's what the plan looks like. There are 3 parts to it. The first part is a meeting with yourself to set quarterly goals. So there's quarterly goals. The second part of the plan is a weekly planning meeting with yourself. And last of all, a weekly work time. In other words, there'll be some point during the week where you will do the work that you've set out as part of this goal. Now, this all may seem very conceptual, but I hope that by the end of our conversation today, that you see that it can be very, very practical. I've been running my world this way for years. So let's start off with the first part of this plan, which is a quarterly goal setting meeting. Now, the strategy that I'm going to suggest starts with a half-day planning session with yourself, where my recommendation is you go to some place you enjoy, some wonderful, stimulating environment. For some of you, that might be very quiet. So for others of you, you might do better in like a cafe or a coffee shop, that sort of thing. Wherever you think the best and wherever it's someplace you will enjoy, plan half a day to get away unplugged. Now, that's the critical part. We want to get away from screens. We want to turn off our phone, and we want to go to this place where we can most easily think big, right? Concentrate, think big, be creative. We want to do this unplugged and get away from screens because the whirlwind lives in our screens, doesn't it? So we want to take some time and set all those things down where we can focus on this one task. So having this meeting with ourselves. So my suggestion is get a notebook and a pen to take time and focus your thoughts. Now, if you're truly going to advance your business, you've got to schedule this time for strategy. You can take half a day, be unplugged, and work through the first part of the strategy. Put it on the calendar with a reminder. Schedule it as an appointment. This scheduled time has to be just as much of a priority as any other client work you're doing. Because honestly, your business is your most important client. Because if you don't take care of that client, nothing else matters. If you're not in business, you can't serve people well. You can't do anything else. So having this structure, these times that we're going to talk about planning and execution, that's your most important client. Your business is your most important client. Now, this is not a unique idea, having a quarterly planning session. If you want to read up a little more on this, Brian Moran wrote a great book about this concept years ago called The 12-Week Year. I highly recommend it. I think there's even an abridged version you can get on Amazon or wherever. It's a wonderful concept of taking basically a year of work and being able to do it in 12 weeks. And it's not overwhelming. It starts with this quarterly planning session where you're identifying some goals. So in this quarterly planning session, take about 2 hours, half a day, the first time probably, to kind of get used to doing this. As you do it more, you can do it in less time. But in this 2 hours, there's two tasks. The first task during your quarterly planning meeting is to identify the issues, what changes you need to make in your business. The second thing you're going to do is start to plan some goals. So let's dig into this a little. So in this quarterly planning meeting, the first thing we're going to do is identify the issues that are challenging me in my business. What are the changes that I most need to make? So that's the first thing, the first question. What are the changes that I need to make in my business? And honestly, just start writing a list. Don't try to think through, just brain dump. And you may actually already have something like this started, like a good idea list that's sitting over there somewhere. But just write down all of the things that you know would make your business better. Don't try to edit it yet. Just brain dump it all the way down. Now, here's the second part of this. Now, once I've gotten my good list of ideas, and by the way, I keep an idea list ongoing. It's in Notion. It lives there, and I just add things. If something pops into my mind, I just add it to the list. And I know that there's time, squared away every quarter where I'm going to take a look at that list and decide which of the things I'm going to focus on. But it gets things out of my head and gives them a place to live. Now, in this quarterly planning meeting, I'm going to look at all of these ideas that I have for my business, and I'm going to ask a very difficult question. Which of these things are going to bring the most immediate impact to my business? Now, that is a critical question to ask. It's a razor that's going to cut off what's important from what isn't. What is the top two things on this list that are going to bring the most immediate impact to my business? Now, why is that question important to answer? Because immediate impact builds momentum. And when you're trying to get a new habit established in your world, momentum is key. Momentum is key to building habits because we need encouragement in this momentum to start to face the whirlwind that has been ruling our world up to this point. So look at this list. Which two are going to bring the most immediate impact in my business? Okay. Now, here's a little bit of insight. The things that you identify on this list, the two things that are going to bring the most immediate impact, are probably things you don't enjoy doing. How do I know that? Because if you enjoy doing them, they would be done already, right? I mean, let's just be real. So they're probably things you don't enjoy, and that's okay. But we need to be honest and identify which of these two things are going to bring the most immediate impact. And from each of those things, we're going to put some goals around them. So we're going to use a framework, it's a very popular framework called SMART goals. A lot of folks have written and taught, and there's a lot of content about SMART goals out there. And I find that to be the best way, with a little twist that I'll show you, the best way to set and manage goals in my world. So we're going to bring some SMART goals to play around those two items that we suggest that we selected that are going to bring the most immediate impact. Now, if you're not familiar with the concept of SMART goals, you can take a minute and Google it, or really, it's just an acronym. SMART stands for goals that are specific, measurable, actionable, relevant, and time-bound. Now, what I've given you as part of the links, I'm going to drop this in once again for anyone who's just joining us. Dropping in the chat is the Google Drive link for today's download. At the end of the packet, you'll find these worksheets. Now, the worksheets I'm about to show you, there's an example that I'm going to show on the screen. That's one filled out with just a sample issue. But there's blanks there as well. And you print those blanks off, use them. Hopefully, they'll help you as you're putting some structure around these goals. So there are two sheets in the goal packet. There's a goal generator and a goal manager. So we're going to start with the goal generator. And let's just say, you know, this person, whoever has gone through their quarterly planning meeting, they've decided they want one of their great ideas on their list that's going to bring immediate impact is in their agency, they want to create a social media service, some kind of service that's going to manage social properties for their clients. So what we're going to do is break down each of the letters in SMART goals. There's a box for each of those, and we're just going to start writing stuff. It doesn't have to be perfect. You know, don't think about making it perfect. This is a brain dump. This is a brainstorming canvas. These worksheets, that's the function they hold. So when I think about my SMART goal, the first characteristic is that it's specific. And so we're just going to write some stuff there. So this example is, I need to create a social media service to create and manage social properties and content for my client. So we're answering questions like, what do I really want to accomplish? Like, what is the thing? It's going to answer questions like who, what, when, where, how. That all goes in that first box. Now, for many folks, that's the goal. Well, my goal is to create a social media service, to create and manage social properties for my clients. And that's where the goal ends. But that's only part of a SMART goal. So let's work our way down a little bit to the M in SMART, which is measurable. Now, what we're going to put in this box are answers to questions like these. How do I know I'm making progress? How do I measure what it is that I'm doing? And thinking in terms of how much, how many, some kind of quantitative thing that lets me measure this goal. Do I know I've accomplished this goal or not? So here in this box, we just say, well, we'll start with Facebook, and then we'll consider adding other platforms like Instagram and Pinterest. Now, as we move down the list, the next letter in SMART is A for actionable. And we're going to answer questions like, is this a goal I can actually achieve? What are the steps that are involved? What are the next actions? And so we'd write something like, I need to understand Facebook ads better. I don't know how those work. I need to develop a template for social marketing. I need to determine the best platform for management of all of these things, right? So I'm just going to start writing down a bunch of things that are the steps involved. Like, how am I even going to start from where I am now and get to an accomplished goal? What are the things that need to be involved there? And I just want to get stuff out of my head on this brainstorming canvas. Now, the R in SMART stands for relevant. Now, this is super important. It's going to answer questions like, why is this goal important in my world? How does it fit into the rest of my business and my life? You might think of it in the terms like, I am doing this so that what? Like, why does this matter? And in this box, we see, well, I need to offer more than just website creation services. Adding a social media management service is key to building recurring revenue in this fictitious agency owner's world, right? And last of all, the T is time bound. So when will this goal be completed? A goal without a deadline is just an idea. So I'll have this service ready to promote by March the 1st. So see how we've got all these boxes basically filled out. This language is not perfect. We just want to get stuff out of our head and onto paper to start thinking through this goal. Now, what we're going to do next is go to this next part at the top right, which is what I've called a declaration template. And so it says something like this: I will, some combination of the specific and measurable things you just wrote, by the time bound part, because or so that the relevant part. Because what we want to do here is we want to create a declaration like, I'm going to do this by this time so that this happens. Right? That's a fully fleshed out SMART goal worded in terms of a declaration, because I want to see that and look at it like, I'm going to do this. And it has all the good characteristics of a SMART goal. So for this person, the declaration would be, I'm going to create a social media management service for my clients using Facebook by March the 1st because it's a key to building recurring revenue in my business. That is a solid goal. And I'm going to take that declaration and I'm going to put that all over the place. I'm going to put it on sticky notes on my mirror in the bathroom. I'm going to put it, right here on my desk where it's looking at me. And I'm reminding myself what I'm doing and why I'm doing it, because that will make it easier for me to keep that goal in focus as I'm doing battle with the whirlwind every day. Does that make sense? So I see questions coming in. Please put those in the Zoom Q&A and we'll get to those at the end. So we've identified the issues, right? That was our goal in the quarterly planning meeting. We've written a list of all the things I want to do in my business. I've picked the top two that I want to, that are going to bring the most immediate impact. And I'm going to run each of those through this goal generator. So now I have these two really good goal declarations. So now I'm going to bring a little more planning here, and I'm going to break those two goals into action items that take a couple of hours a piece to work out. So let me show you how that works. You may have noticed on the previous worksheet that we didn't use the A part of SMART, the actionable. They focus on this sheet. So I'm going to move my goal over. I'm going to create a social media management service, ... That's right there. And the next part here is just some space for me to write down some research. What are resources and information that I need in order to work through this goal? So I'm just going to jot all that down here. What are some other notes I found? Like, for example, some other company offers a management service for $349 with a $499 setup fee. Just something to keep everything in one spot. Again, nothing magic about this. It's a brainstorming canvas as I'm thinking through how to actually manage this goal. So what are the things I need to do? I need to understand Facebook ads, conversion tracking, analytics, researching the price and competitors, the best platform, find good template. Now, you may recognize some of these because they were in the actionable part of the previous worksheet. So I'm going to pull those things into this worksheet. And at the bottom, what this worksheet is going to give me is a list of action items, a to-do list. I'm going to research the best course for learning Facebook ads. I'm going to have that done by the 8th. I'm going to complete that Facebook course by the 15th. I'm going to research management platforms, have a content strategy template. So we're working those things down as tasks with a date. That's it. So I'm going to take a few hours, and you'll probably see, that's why I say it might take half a day the first time, maybe 2 hours as you go and get better at this. You do learn the skill of breaking a goal down into action items the more you do it, but give yourself some time, create those two goals and break them down into action items that take about 2 hours to complete. And there's a reason for that, which I'll get to in just a minute. So at the end of this quarterly goal meeting, I'm leaving with 2 goals and their action items. Now, can you do that? Absolutely, you can. Absolutely. Especially if you're sitting in a place you like and you're thinking about all the great things you could be and do in your business. Maybe you're having some good coffee or good tea, and you're just thinking through all the things you need to do and the steps it's going to take to accomplish those. Now, that's part one of the plan. Let's move to the second part of the plan, which is a weekly planning meeting with myself. Now, this typically takes about 30 minutes. It might take a little longer the first few times you do it because you're getting used to a new system, but it should take roughly 30 minutes. So there's a couple of things I need to do during this weekly planning meeting with myself. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to schedule my weekly work. And I'm going to ask myself the question, when will I work on my goals this week? So I look at my calendar and I see all the things that I have scheduled. When's a good time in this coming week where I can block out 2 to 4 hours? So a half a day or just 2 hours, whatever you can afford in the schedule of your week, block out that time. It's an appointment. It's blocked. You're busy. You can't be scheduled. That is the time where you are going to execute on that to-do list that you created in that previous worksheet. Now, it's got to be scheduled. This is, I can't emphasize this enough. It's got to be on the calendar with a reminder blocked off where nobody else can schedule that time, because it's far too easy for us to give that time away to client work. But honestly, any of us really, if we put a 2-hour block on our calendar to work on one of these goal action items, we can even, doesn't matter how busy you are, you can fit that in. You absolutely can. It's just a point of doing it. So the second thing you're going to do during the weekly planning meeting, and this is critical, you're going to gather the resources you need so that you can start working immediately. So that may be links, it might be documents, it might be whatever. It just lives on a folder on your desktop or wherever. And the reason this is important is when it comes, 10 a.m. on Friday morning, let's say I blocked off 10 to noon on Friday to work on my goals this week. I don't want it to come to 10 a.m. and I'm thinking, what am I supposed to be doing? And where is all that stuff? I want that to be focused time. So when the clock turns 10, I open that folder, I start looking at it, and I'm in the work. I'm starting the work so I can focus on it immediately. So get everything together during that weekly planning meeting with yourself so that when the execution time comes that week, when you're going to work on the goal, everything's ready. You can just pick it up and go. Now, this is so important. And this is where most people fall off the strategy here at this weekly planning meeting. Like I've talked to folks through this and coaching conversations for years and years, and I'll hear something like, well, it didn't really work for me. And I'd ask them, well, how did your weekly planning meeting go? And I didn't really do that. Right. This is the part where it seems to fail. So you got to do the weekly plan, and it has to happen before you start the week. So some folks I've coached have done this on Friday afternoons. Some people like me, I do it generally on Sunday evenings. Or some folks that are really early morning people, they'll get up super early on Monday morning and plan the week. And that's fine. It doesn't, whatever works for you is fine, but it has to be before you hit your desk on Monday morning, your actual work desk. So the week has to be planned with that time set aside for you to do these goals. Otherwise, the whirlwind is going to win. Without a plan, the whirlwind always wins. Okay, so let me give you I know a lot of folks are more visual than others. So here's a simplified example of a weekly plan. Now, I want to say this. This is overly simplified, but on purpose. So I want you to kind of see how these things fit together. Now, I learned a long time ago from a mentor that you can pretty easily divide your days into three parts. There's a morning, there's an afternoon, and an evening. I realize that's mind-blowingly brilliant. But try to contain yourself. But it's helpful as we start thinking about how our days work. So I've got morning time, I've got afternoon time, and I've got evening time. Now I divide each day roughly into 3 blocks, and my family is typically going to get one of those blocks. So it might look something like this. Mondays tend to be whirlwind day because you got to catch up from the weekend. So maybe Monday this week, I've got the morning and the afternoon as all whirlwind stuff. Particularly this week. So it's like the first week clients are back after a holiday break, and there's a lot of stuff to do. And so, having the whole day blocked off makes sense. Like we have to consider the reality of the whirlwind. The whirlwind is always going to be here. And then Monday evening, it's family time. Tuesday morning is going to be a whirlwind time. Oh, Tuesday afternoon, I'm working on a project, a website build, right? Family gets the evening. The same thing for Wednesday. Oh, Thursday. This was something I used to do a lot, especially when my kids were little. Maybe they had something at the school and I was going to go see a school program or whatever, go, have donuts with dad or whatever on Thursday morning. And the family, that's family time in the morning, but that means I'm working that night, right? My family gets 1 block a day, roughly. And then Friday, here we go. I'm blocking out the morning for strategy. So 4 hours here. And then the whirlwind in the afternoon. So the whirlwind always has a place to live. See that? The whirlwind always has somewhere to live. And it can be contained by good productivity habits. Like if you're in the middle of project time, don't check your email. Don't answer your phone. Let it go to voicemail. Knowing that there's going to be a whirlwind time coming up pretty soon where you can deal with those issues. Stay out of your email. Put your tickets or put client requests in a ticket system where you can address them in one spot. There's various ways, and we can talk about that more in future live streams, about deliberate productivity habits that keep the whirlwind contained in the boxes that you allocate for it. But if you don't have a plan, the whirlwind is going to just rule the week. And you've seen that, right? Like you've lived it, where the whirlwind just takes over and it's just everywhere, right? But you can contain it. Okay, so we've talked about our quarterly planning time. We've got our quarterly goals. We've planned out our week. Now we're going to move into the actual doing of the work. So this is 2 to 4 hours that I've scheduled out sometime during my week. It is scheduled on the calendar with a reminder. I'm not going to cancel it. I'm not going to break this schedule because my business is more important than any client. Because if my business doesn't survive or if my business isn't healthy, I'm not going to be able to serve my clients as well as I could. So think about this. If you were in a meeting with a client and one of your other clients emailed you or called you, would you stop the meeting with the client that you're in at that moment and answer a call from another client or reply to an email from a different client? Of course you wouldn't. That would be weird. But we do that all the time when it comes to our own work. So we really have to reorient our mindset around our business is our most important client. So when I'm in this execution time where I'm working on my goal, I'm not checking email, I'm not answering phone calls, I'm getting the work done for that block that I've allocated to it. So I call this my CEO time. It's on my calendar every week. It's when I'm doing work that makes the business better. For me these days, it's usually Friday mornings because the week has tended to die down by then. I found that right now, that time works well for me. I know others who like to put it on Wednesday morning because they can do some work at the beginning and work on their business on Wednesday and then do some work at the end of the week. Just depends on what works best for you. And it is experimental. Like you figure out over time what works best, but it's on the calendar with a reminder. And I do not overschedule it. I do not compromise the time because far too many times throughout my many years of working with clients, I've put off my own strategic work to do minor work for a client. And my business has suffered because of it. So I have, my intention is not to do that again. So what do? We've got our weekly goal, our quarterly goal planning, a weekly planning, and a weekly execution. And every quarter, I repeat that process. Now, for those of you that are a little more visual, this may be helpful. Here's this whole strategy in a one-page overview. So I start with that quarterly meeting with myself. Half a day, I'm going to identify the issues that are going to, that I'm dealing with in my business or great ideas or whatever. I'm going to pick the top two and I'm going to plan goals around those top two ideas that are going to bring the most immediate impact to my business. So that quarterly planning ends up in 2 goals. And from those goals, I'm going to break those down into action items that take a couple of hours each to do. Now, every week I have a weekly planning meeting with myself in which I will find at least 2 hours during the week where I'm going to take at least one of those action items and I'm going to put it on the calendar with a reminder. And then that week, during that time, I'm going to do that thing. So that action, that to-do task is done. And my goal is a little closer to being fulfilled. The next week happens. I have a weekly planning meeting with myself. I'm going to find a couple of hours during the week where I can accomplish the second action. I'm going to put that on the calendar with a reminder, and I'm going to get that work done. And I keep doing that until all of my action items are complete. And then every quarter, I start the process again. Have a half-day planning meeting with myself. I'm going to have 2 goals, a bunch of action items, and I'm going to get those things done. That makes sense? It's an easy thing to understand. It's a little bit harder to actually do. And so as we start to come into this final section, I want to give you a few suggestions that are honestly a whole list of things that I've done wrong in trying to work through this strategy in my own world and business. So the first suggestion I have, based on someone who has a lot of experience doing this the wrong way, is to prioritize. You will always have more goals than you have time. You will always have more goals than time. Your list, your idea list, is always going to be greater than the time you have to execute on the ideas. And that's okay. That's why it's so very important to pick just a couple of those ideas to focus on at a time. Like I want the 2 things for the quarter, or maybe it's one huge goal. That's the focus for the quarter. I want to give those things focus. We want to focus on immediate impact that builds momentum because momentum is the key to building habits. So we have to be honest with ourselves. What do we really need to do? And sometimes it's helpful to bring someone in, a coach or a business buddy or somebody like that, to help you really think through what is the thing? What are the 2 things that I need to be working on this quarter to really bring immediate impact to my business? Now, don't try to make a little progress on a lot of things. That's a really important piece to this puzzle. There's a thing out there called the law of diminishing returns. It's applicable in lots of different areas of life. But here's a study that the Franklin Covey Company did years ago that studied in the business world. Here's a team, and they studied how many goals they had in addition to their regular whirlwind of daily activity. So if a team had 2 to 3 goals they were trying to accomplish, in addition to their regular workload, they were able to accomplish 2 to 3 goals with excellence. Great. So what happens if they tried to do more? So if a team had 4 to 10 goals in addition to their regular workload, they were only able to achieve with excellence 1 to 2 of those goals. And what do you think happened to the others here that had 11 to 20 goals in addition to their whirlwind work? They didn't get any of them done, right? And that makes sense. Like you think about it, your goals and your actions, like a pizza, how are you going to eat a pizza? You pick up one slice at a time and you eat it, right? But, what if you just took one bite around each slice of the pizza until it would take you forever to get it actually fully eaten, right? So this is the law of diminishing returns in effect in our world. We're always going to have more goals than time. So we have to focus on just the thing that matters. Couple of things every quarter. Now, this is a painful decision though, because through this process of prioritizing, it means that sometimes good ideas have to be put on a shelf. They have to just stay on that ideas list or a someday list. They have to be put on a shelf because there's other things right now that are more important. That can be really hard to do, but that's a key to being successful in this strategy. Now, a second suggestion I would give you is to separate your roles. This is a very practical thing that I found to be super helpful for me. In my roles in my business, I am both the CEO and an employee, and I wear different hats. There's some tasks I do where I'm wearing my CEO hat. There's other tasks I do where I'm wearing the employee hat. So when it comes to this goal setting and planning and moving the business forward, these are 2 very important distinctions. The CEO makes the plan, the employee executes the plan. And so when I'm doing my CEO meetings with myself, I have my CEO hat on. And one thing that I found to be very helpful to distinguishing these things is that I don't do my CEO work at my employee desk. This desk right here where I'm having this live stream, this is my employee desk. And this is where I do all my client work. But any of the planning work and bigger picture thinking CEO work, I do elsewhere. I sit down on our deck by our lake. I may go to a coffee shop that I enjoy, whatever it is. I do not do CEO work at my employee desk because what I've found is the whirlwind lives here. The whirlwind lives at this desk. And just by my own human weakness, it's easier for me to get sucked into the whirlwind if I'm sitting at this desk. So separate your roles. You're the CEO and employee, and maybe the CEO gets to work somewhere fun when it's the CEO's time to work. All right, third suggestion. Find the right time for focus. Really, really important here. When is the best time of the day for you to do strategic work? A lot of times what I've found as I've been working with people in a coaching conversation is that they're trying to do strategic, high-level thinking work like in the afternoon, the late afternoon. And for most of us, we operate on this kind of an inverted bell curve throughout the day where after lunchtime, our energy diminishes before it peaks up again in the evening. That's it's a very common energy pattern throughout the day that we experience as human beings. And doing strategic high-level thinking in the afternoon is usually a lot harder, and you don't get as good results. So think about what is the right time of day that I should focus on doing this strategic work for my business. And I'm going to guard that time and stay out of my inbox during that time of day. The fourth suggestion I have for you is this, to consider a sprint week. So what does that mean? It means, well, I'm going to plan multiple blocks of doing strategy work in a week. So this works really well when business gets slow. Uh, so if you, like most of us, have feast or famine seasons in your business where you have a ton of client work or not a lot of client work, and there's oftentimes no predictability to that. It's just sometimes you're busy, sometimes you're not. Uh, when you're not busy, when it's a slow time, do a sprint week. And here's how that might look. So in the morning, I'm going to do a sprint. So strategy work, knocking out a ton of goal. Like I might be able to do an entire quarterly goal, like knock out all the action items of a quarterly goal if I focus every morning in a week to just knocking it out and getting it done. Now, why doesn't this work for me in the past? Like, why haven't I been able to do this well? Because I didn't leave time for the whirlwind in the afternoons. Like I was just trying to focus on getting things done and trying not to think about client work. That doesn't work for me. So what I learned is I give the whirlwind space every day, no matter what. There's always going to be whirlwind to work with. So morning times when I'm the freshest and most creative and most productive, I'm going to focus on knocking those goals out in a sprint for the week. But in the afternoon, I can more easily ignore my want to get to the client work while I'm trying to do sprint work by knowing that there's time for the whirlwind to live in the afternoon. Does that make sense? So give time for the whirlwind that will let you focus on the goal work that you could knock out in a whole morning. So sprints oftentimes very helpful if you have a slower time in your business. Now, last suggestion is this. Taming the whirlwind takes time. You're unlearning a bunch of habits. So if you don't get it right in the first time, give yourself a break. Somebody said, I think it was G.K. Chesterton, anything worth doing is worth doing badly at first, right? Badly at first. It's worth doing. So if you struggle to get this strategy implemented right away, you're not alone. Like it would be shocking to me if the first time you set out to have a quarterly meeting and a weekly planning and a weekly execution that you did it perfectly the first, out of the gate. That would be shocking. It just generally doesn't happen that way. So, hey, this week I missed my execution time. I didn't, I let the whirlwind take over. That's fine. Put a pin in it, come back to it next week. That's the beautiful thing about the way the calendar works. There's always a tomorrow. We'll have tomorrow to do something different, or next week, or next quarter, even. It's all right. Taming the whirlwind takes time to get this practice rooted into how I do my work, and just keep at it. Anything worth doing is worth doing badly at first. All right. So as we summarize, the whirlwind never goes away. When urgency and importance clash, urgency is going to win every time. And so what we have to do is to create and execute this strategy that's going to let us accomplish our goals in the middle of the whirlwind. All right. If you're listening on replay, you can scan that QR code. You can get the slides and worksheets that I was mentioning earlier. That should just open a Google Drive PDF page for you. You can just download those right away, and you'll have access to all those worksheets that I mentioned earlier. All right, let's take a look at some questions. I know we had some questions that ran through in the chat. If you have other questions, I don't see any in Zoom Q&A, but just go ahead and drop those in the chat again, if you would, please, and we'll answer any questions that you have now before we start to wrap up. Thomas is saying for all the notes, he uses multiple whiteboards on your wall. Yeah, whatever works. Like there is no universal solution for any of this, right? It's just whatever works for you and whatever is going to allow you to do this paradigm effectively, do it. Yeah, very good. Other questions? Drop those in the chat or in the Zoom Q&A. Shanta had a question earlier. Do you not have to identify what the problems are at first, or is that essentially the same idea? Yeah, so that was asked during the quarterly planning session. And yeah, this is where what you want to do in that quarterly planning session with yourself is figure out what are the things that I'm dealing with. What ideas do I have that are going to make my business better? What problems exist that need to be solved? Whatever that is. And then pick the top 2 that are going to bring the most immediate impact. Like if I solve this problem in this next quarter, it is going to bring immediate impact to my business. That goes on the list. All right. Any other questions before we start to wrap up? Mike, are there any new emerging AI tools you have found helped you? Absolutely. Like in this particular strategy, I talk to ChatGPT all the time about how I'm thinking and my workflow and all of that. But here's what I'll say. And look, I'm a geek. I love tools. I chase the shiny by nature. I love new tech. Okay. But let me just encourage you that the best tech that you can do to put this strategy into practice is print out the worksheets and use a pen. I promise you. Start there, and then enhance with your favorite AI chatbot, Chat GPT, Claude, whatever. Talk to it about what you're trying to do. Heck, drop the slide deck into it and let it ask you questions and help you think about what you're trying to do. If you have your someday list of great ideas of things that you want to do in your business, put that into your chat, put into Chat GPT or whatever you're using, and let it start to help you think through which of those two ought to be, the things you focus on for this quarter. It could even help you break out the action items. Yeah. So I want to be real careful to just emphasize that the software is not the solution here. You could solve this problem with all different kinds of software. The real thing here is a commitment to a workflow of a quarterly planning meeting, a weekly planning session with yourself, weekly scheduling, and then a weekly execution. That flow is the key to taming the whirlwind. The tech can help you work in some of the steps, but software will never be the answer to this problem. It's a great question, Mike. Thanks. All right. Any other questions or comments before we wrap this up? I'm going to drop in once again the Google Drive link in the chat for those of you that missed that earlier. And let me wrap up with this little bit of vision. So if you had a quarterly planning meeting with yourself next week, if you put those goals together, if you started executing on weekly time where you're knocking off the action items that you've identified, 6 months from now, when we get to the summer, when we get to June, July, 6 months from now, how could your business be different? What would be different how much more efficient would you be? How much more effective or profitable would your business be if you started implementing these great ideas that you already have? What is on your to-do list that you could finally get accomplished? So 6 months from now, how could it be different? Matter of fact, how could your life be different? Because honestly, if less of my world is taken up by the whirlwind, what does that create for me? It creates margin. It creates extra time in my schedule. It creates, if I can start to contain the whirlwind so that it doesn't run all over the rest of my world, that margin is invaluable. I have time for that. I can actually spend time with the family or, do hobbies and things that I enjoy, take a real vacation, actually have time and space for reflection or building out more strategy or building out more systems and processes. This will create margin for you and it will change how your business works. I've seen it happen in my own world and over and over again in the lives of folks that I've coached. So that brings us to the end here. Thanks so much for hanging out with me for the last hour. I truly hope that this concept will be helpful to you in 2026 as you're doing your work with your clients. Again, if you're watching this on the replay, one last chance for the QR code here. That will download the slide deck and those worksheets. Well, again, thanks for being with me for the last hour. I'm back on Thursday, as usual, for office hours here with Hosting.com's Agency Success, where we go further together.